Hey, welcome back to another video. Had a conversation with a person last night about victories and defeat and feeling overwhelmed about this entire process. This particular person is in the midst of a 9-year nightmare, and things have just ramped up again. And thought everything was fine. Finds himself back in court, happened to defend himself again, and feels just wiped out. Now I get these conversations a lot, and they typically go a couple of different ways. The majority of the time, the person is actually doing pretty good, and other times, what I mean by, and I'll get into what I mean by that in a moment, but and then other times it's, as you start going through the conversation, the questions that I typically ask, like, okay, so what's the details? How's your relationship with the kids? If allegations are being put out there, what's being said by the judge and the attorney? And here's the thing that's really amazing, and this is something that I dealt with as well. It's the catastrophic thinking and the catastrophizing of the situation, to where you feel all hope is lost and you're just so emotionally burnt and stressed. And it makes sense. It's your life that's you're fighting for. This isn't trying to get some contract, or this isn't trying to negotiate a good deal on a house or a truck. You're basically fighting for your future, your kids' future, your financial independence. And when you're constantly going through that, and you're constantly being reminded of the shit show that this is, I hate to say that, but it is, it can be really tough. Now, and as I was going through this conversation with this person, they kept talking about little things that were victories. Initially, they had a visitation, standard type visitation. The person that had custody of the other of his kids, which wasn't the mom, by the way, his grandparents, decided that he was a scumbag and abusive to the kids, and went to court to get more custody, to limit his visitation, and to get more money. And primarily, it was more than likely it was one of two reasons. It was either a money grab because I want more money. The only way I can get it is from this person. So what can I do to do it? Oh, I can do all these things and go that way. Or, and it was probably that one, to be honest, or it was, how dare you move on and start being happy again? How dare you? Let me throw a wrench in your life to try to remind you that you can't be happy. So this particular person was completely ready to give up. Was like, forget it. I'm tired. I can't do this. I've spent a ton of money. I'm out of money. I just can't deal with this. I can't deal with this forever and ever and ever. And again, as we were discussing things, we were talking about the actual victories. Part of the victories were whenever the temporary orders were put into play, there was no increase in child support. That's kind of unusual, right? What state decides to not increase child support in a situation like this? So it was kind of like, all right, well, we're going to temporarily put these orders into place to where we can see what's really going on, err on the side of caution. And said no on the child support increase. And whenever it came down to doing a custody evaluation, made the other person pay for it. I'm like, holy crap, really? Most of the time, the guy ends up having to pay for everything, and child support goes up immediately. They base it on the new timeshare, and they just they work to destroy the person. So I'm like, look, man, you know, you've got a lot of victories right there. And then as the conversation progressed, he was talking about the input he was getting from his attorney and stuff. Now, just to be clear, there's no guarantee in family court, right? I don't care if you have, you know, video of the person doing something. You know, you don't have 100% potential success in that one hearing. I mean, you could potentially appeal it and fight it more and ultimately prevail. But so I think most people are very cautious, attorneys, I mean, even me. I mean, whenever, I mean, this person particularly asked me, he was like, well, do you think I have a chance to win? And I'm like, well, you have the best case scenario, but, you know, not necessarily is it a slam dunk. I've known too many people on this channel who had slam dunks, went to court, and walked out like, what the hell happened? This rolls back into what I was trying to talk about with recognizing your victories. And this is the same problem I had. I had a lot of people telling me that I was looking, my situation looked pretty good. They couldn't say I was going to win. They couldn't tell me, hey, don't worry, no, don't worry your pretty little head, everything's going to be fine. But they were trying to say that. It's just really hard because we're looking for guarantees. When you're going through this, you want someone to say, you're going to win, you got everything lined up, it's all perfect, you've done everything right. Unfortunately, most of the time, that's not exactly how people are going to communicate this with you. They'll give you hints. You got to listen for the hints. The problem is, like I said, is most of the time in this situation, we're so worn down. We've been whittled down to the nub that you don't hear it, right? All you hear is, well, you might lose. You know, you got like a 95% chance of winning, but there's a 5% chance you might lose. And, you know, you focus on that. Well, and to be perfectly honest, most people, professionals wouldn't tell you, you know, unless they're trying to scam you out of money, right? People will do that. People will say, you know, oh yeah, you know, give me $15,000, give me $10,000 retainer. This is a slam dunk, you know, the best money you ever spent. And then you lose and you're like, what the hell happened? Well, you know, you'll win some and lose some. And they just kind of, you know, make sure your check clears. So my point of this is that it's good to have a sanity check with someone to kind of give you some different advice. The problem is that a lot of people, they just don't know how to say it. I mean, I had a buddy of mine who was frustrated because they had lost custody of their child, and would routinely tell me, well, I don't know what you're going through because I never got to be a dad, right? It was a sore spot for them. So they would always bring out the bad things that happened to them, and in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, is that going to happen? And it just really wears you down. So be mindful, or be cautious. Be cautious of how you look at your situation. Look for the little victory points on it. Realize, and I say this a lot, realize that this is not just a single battle. A court hearing or even a court trial isn't necessarily the single battle. It could be, you know, the major battle that ultimately wins the war, but these are all little steps. A lot of times this takes a long time. Now, as this conversation progressed on, there was little comments about, you know, things about the way the judge responded, you know, things that the judge was irritated at with the other party. And all those little things kind of add up into a bigger picture that, okay, you know, you probably have the best, you know, you have everything laid out for the best chance of success. Here's the last thing, not the last thing, but the other key point on this is if you have everything laid out and it makes sense legally and you have legal standing on what your arguments are and a judge sides against you, appeal it. And if you're not familiar with that process or your attorney says not to do it, because a lot of times attorneys won't want to do it because they don't want to risk the political damage to their colleagues or to the judge in future hearings. Check out Alex Falcone, who runs The Proper Person, He has a whole channel that talks about self-representations and appeal processes, and he was successful in that. Now, it took him, in his situation, took him like 8 or 9 years to ultimately prevail. And, you know, he was getting destroyed in family court for the first part of it. And now he's running this whole thing in Nevada, our Nevada judges, where he's really making some serious changes in the way people look at judges and appeal processes and stuff like that. It's phenomenal. You need to check him out. I'll leave a link in the description and a comment above. If you're watching this video later and I haven't done that, put a comment saying, hey, you forgot to put the links in there if you can't find it, because he's good to check out. My point is on that is, if things don't go right and you have, you know, valid reasons for your stuff, you need to appeal it. It's just, it doesn't mean that everything's over. Now, the thing I want to emphasize on this is, when I was going through, or I just basically not emphasize, but rolling back to one of my personal experience, everybody was telling me that 50-50 wasn't going to happen. It was going to be, you know, a long shot. I was starting to believe that the ex was going to be able to leave the state of California, move away, that I would never see the kids. She'd get 100% custody, you know, sole custody. Basically, I would be on the child support nightmare train for the next 12 years or whatever the heck it was at the time. I think 12 is the right number. And I started to feel like I felt like I lost. And I even got to the point where I started distancing myself from the kids in anticipation for that loss. I wasn't able to hear all the positive things that people were saying. The custody evaluator made comments that if I would have heard them, I would have heard that 50-50 was more than likely going to happen, and if she left the state, it was going to be 100% towards me. I would have heard the marriage counselors' comments when they were saying, you know, you need to get a custody evaluation, you need to have us do it, you need to subpoena our records, right? And I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't hearing the nuances of what people were trying to say. Here's the thing to remember. Professionals have an ethical obligation on how they communicate with you. Therapists aren't going to generally tell you, you know, hey, you know, knucklehead, listen to me, you need to go do this, this, and this, and you're going to win. You know, they're not going to do that. Your attorney's not going to say this is a slam dunk, you're going to win. Now, they might say you have a pretty darn good case. I mean, you have everything lined up for a really good chance. You can't give up now, you know, but they're not going to give you absolutes. So keep that in mind. And it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do whenever you're in the middle of it. You're in that fight for your life. You're seeing your entire world be obliterated. Or let's say you've been stable for a while and you're just been thrown back in the mix of this. And that's what I'm going to finish up on. I want to hit that last point. But you have to keep everything. You have to keep everything in perspective. The other thing I want to mention on this is we can get into a false sense of security when we've had a little bit of time with the ex or the situation not trying to pull the rug out from underneath us. The biggest gauge on how you're healing from this is when they do something and whether it really knocks you down. Basically what I'm saying is how you respond to it. So often, a lot of time, I'll say it this way, a lot of time you think, you know, you've had some distance, you're living your life, you put all this crap underneath the bed in a box, and then it comes back up, and it's like, it feels like it just happened the day before. If you're in that situation, that's an indicator that you haven't emotionally healed from this. And although it sucks, you use that to say, okay, crap, this is coming up, I'm still angry about it, I'm still irritated, rightfully so, I'm not saying you don't have a reason to be that way. But use that as an indicator to say that you need to do more work on that. whether it's therapy or interpersonal work or meditation or however it is you want to deal with it. But what that's really telling you is that you're still holding some anger and resentment back. Putting something away and ignoring it isn't healing. It feels like it. I went through that in the first couple of years. There was a period of time when I started dating Debbie. Things were going good. The ex was ignoring me because she thought she won and everything was great. And as soon as she heard from the kids, because I let the kids meet Debbie after a few months, that I was seeing somebody, the shit show started again. And what happened is I thought I was healed, and I wasn't. All those emotions for the months before, year before, freaking flared back up and was like it never happened. I was angry again. I was irritated. All those things I thought I had dealt with, like the financial ruin and the retirement and money and everything, came right back up. So that stuff does go away. If you work on it and you process it and you release it, it doesn't have an effect on you. Now, not to say that if the ex decided to try to take me back to court for something or played some shenanigans that I wouldn't be irritated, and probably would be, and it would be frustrating to try to come up with money on it. But I've worked so hard to get into this peaceful state, to get to where I'm taking my life back, that I don't want that corruption back in my head. When you get to that point to where they can do something and it doesn't draw you back down in the pit of hell, that's when you've actually started healing. And that's what I've wanted to finish on. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Take care.